Hello and welcome to where we left off. It was my talk about books, and that is exactly where are going to leave to start picking up again. Last time I was ending with the story of Magpie's Soul, which would be the literal translation of the name. I don't know if it's the actual translation. Or if the German name is actually the actual name, I don't even know that much. So now we are going to talk about some other books that I liked reading. I'm going to talk about a little bit more about the trilogy that I was talking about called Florentuna. Yeah, I already told. I'm going to re-summarize the premise from the beginning. It is about a young boy named Girolamo. And Girolamo was born in Italy, Florence, as far as I remember. He had a father and it was not a mother, which was not his biological mother. It was a stepmother, I guess. I think so, but I'm not sure. The point of the story is he's getting not intimidated, but he's at one point in his life there were a lot of people that were killed around him. They were his very important members of his family, and that point has scared him. Girolamo was still a very young boy. He wasn't an adult yet, as far as I remember, and he was really scared and everything. He found out a lot of things about what was happening, and he eventually also found out about a whole nother world, which was basically a parallel world to Florence. Okay, I have to check another thing. Okay, I have just checked. It is actually called Florence. I wasn't sure whether or not it was called Florence, the state that I was talking about. Anyways, that world where what he saw was a parallel world to the world he lived in, and he met a lot of people. I think the first people he met were the kids of the night. In the first book, he met the kids of the night, and he had to. Okay, he had to endure a lot of hardships. One of those was. I have to check. I have to be concentrating again. Okay, one of those hardships was in the form of him having to deal with a very dangerous beast, basically. It's hard to call it a beast, but I don't want to spoil anything. And he had a really tough time, but he was able to prevail and do what he wanted to do. Yeah, this description isn't the best, I know. It has been a lot of time and a very long time until the last time I read this book, and I don't know all the contents of it out of the back of my head. And yeah, but still, what is so special about this book? So I don't know whether or not to call it special. First of all, the protagonist was really young. You had a feeling of immaturity and fear, which was presented very well in the book, and that was a positive thing about this book. Another thing is the representation of the powers that the people could use. The powers they use are a fantasy. It's a fantasy power, which is a really cool fantasy power, to be more specific. I can't really say what I liked about the power. It has a lot to do with creation of life, I would say. It is most akin to a beautiful creation of. It's not creation. I think I should summarize it as the visualization, realization, and interpretation of life forms. If I that's that's quite, I don't know, yeah, it's somewhere around that time. And yeah, I really like that idea. I personally have a very specific image of what the actual creations that I'm talking about look like. One specific symbol that was being talked about a lot was the butterfly. I always imagined a blue butterfly which was made up of blue threads, blue luminous threads, when they were talking about it. But I can't really tell you why. Because for one, I didn't know how much of all that I could convey in this position. And second of all, it's still also been quite a long time, so I don't know for sure whether I would be really able to convey everything I want to convey. But yeah, that's also a thing. That book has, especially the second part of the trilogy was my favorite book ever for a long time, because of the one thing that I should mention. There are a lot of grotesque figures and monsters that are depicted in this book. I think this book was at it was rated 13+, so you had to be 13 or above to read the book. I wasn't 13 or above to read the book. But it was a really... It had a really... some monsters had a really grotesque feeling to them, which I liked. It was... Or I especially in retrospect, I like it. It was terrifying. It was scary. I liked... it wasn't a bad kind of scary, but it was a depiction that has made someone feel more immersed because of it being so scary, I would say. At least for me, that was the case. The writing itself was also quite interesting. How some things were... it was interesting to balance out how well... it was interesting how they balanced different characters in comparison to each other. The powers they gave, how they also balanced the power he gave to the to those characters. That was also pretty interesting. There were quite a lot of interesting parts to the story. That's what I was. Okay, I should have not eaten this warp seed at this point, because now I'm at this point. Okay. We're going to try to survive. That is the goal. We're going to take this iron form, and we're going to survive, hopefully. If both of those... Yeah, I don't think that's a problem. Okay, I have some idea of what to do. I'm going to target this... what is it called? Hitmon Top? Yeah, I think it's called Hitmon Top. And now the iron forms are contaminated. I can't use them anymore because they are contaminated. I think that's how it works. I'm going to try to kill this Hitmon. Oh, it wasn't a Hitmon Top. Okay, good to see. Then this Ditto is also going to get killed. Please? Okay, this wasn't what I expected. I didn't think they could counter the silver forms. Whatever. Oh. That's the thing. I think I am going to have to negate all the progress that I just made. Also the progress of losing. Because that one I accidentally typed on no, which I typed on yes to save, and no on sending a... Whatever, I made a mistake, and this means that I can't... the game completely failed to save, and that's why I had to reset to the save point that I artificially made. Anyways, I was at Florenturna. Whoop, that's said. Okay. I already talked about Florenturna, so I liked it. A lot of good storytelling, a very visual a very easy to visualize representation of monsters, and I was surprised by how well the author was able to tell what he wanted to tell. All being said with a very fixed shade of nostalgia. I can't really vouch for what I just said because it's been 10 years or so. So that's the thing, and one other book that I have not mentioned yet, I have to Google its name this time. I cannot remember the title of this story, so for now I'm just going to tell you about a book which I can't remember. The book is about a girl, a female protagonist, which I found surprising because this was the first book or the first series of books out of basically 2 that I remember as far as I know, which was a fantasy book and featured a female protagonist. Am I telling you a lie right now? I have to think about this. I read a lot of fantasy books. There are 3 series of books that feature a female protagonist, which are fantasy books. 2 of the 4, okay, I remember 4 books which have this. Okay, 4 series of books. Okay, the first one is the one that I want to talk about. The second one would be Secrets of Nicholas Flamel, which is one of the best series ever. The third one would be Skullduggery Pleasant. Some may have heard about this book because it's quite popular. And the fourth one, I forgot its name, I think Lockwood? Yeah, Lockwood. Lockwood is a trilogy of books, which is also quite a good read. Yeah, those 4 book series are ones that have a female protagonist and play in a fantasy style setting. But the first 2 that I mentioned, the one that I'm going to talk about this time and another one with the Secrets of Nicholas Flamel, are special. They are really, the other 2 were more so focused into another genre, which was more so criminology, I guess? Well, I don't know how to put it. Detectives. Being detectives, basically. And the other one was a little bit of horror. The first 2 were really fantasy books, and that's why I want to talk about them, because I like fantasy books a lot. Normally, maybe I should first off start talking about some. I have a lot of experience with fantasy books. Some of those would be this guy ate for revive a seed. Okay, some of those would be, for example, the book called Harry Potter, of course, is a fantasy book, but I'm talking about really more so. This is a little more fantasy that I'm talking about. Beast Quest is a series of a book about a young boy that has to go on an adventure because he was the chosen hero and he has to defeat monsters. That was a really good book in my childhood, where I read, of course, I also read a book called Percy Jackson. If you ever heard of Percy Jackson, it's a very cool series. It also has 2 movies, I think, maybe 3. I think the author is Mikhail Peinkoffer. I'm not sure. I might be mistaken, so don't quote me on that. But still, Percy Jackson, the Legends or the Heroes of Olympus. I think I can eat this one. Yep, I'm going to eat the citrus berry. The Heroes of Olympus. And another one would be the Kane Chronicles, which would almost count as a female protagonist, but mostly not, because it was basically a pair of 2 people. Then there was something like The Secret Zoo, I think. I'm not sure about that name. Maya's Fault was also a somewhat fantasy-like book. The point is, I read a lot of books with a fantasy genre, and I really like reading fantasy books. All the more reason to talk about the 2 book series that I'm going to mention now, which would be 2 books that have a female protagonist, and I really am making this distinction, even though it did not have as far as I remember, any repercussions on the story. Before I say it, am I right by saying this? Yes, it did not have any repercussions about the story. it was just surprising to me to read this, because at that point I wasn't familiar with the idea of female characters being the protagonist, because it just wasn't common in the books that I read. I really like those books, not specifically because of that, but just I find that pretty interesting, which was why I went on this whole tangent. It's not that important, but still. Yeah, that's one thing. So, the book is about a tamer. Tamer, what is this? In this world, this is a fantasy world, there are beasts, which can be categorized in a total of 4 broad categories, which is, I can't really say them because I don't remember them, but there are really cool beasts. There are even things like, there are things like harpies, there are things like dragons, chimeras, there are so many cool things. There are 2 beings, first of all, there are every single, or not every single human, there are humans which can bond with those beings. And they are called, I'm going to call them tamers, because I don't know whether or not the English version calls them tamers, or whether or not there exists an English version of it. I'm just going to assume that it does. But those tamers, they have the ability to bond with one specific type of animal. They are treated as animals, those monsters, so most of the time they are going to be called animals. And the interesting part about that is how they can only bond with this type of animal, and it is quite hard to bond with an animal. It is a very interesting way of giving people different what would I call this? This is an interesting way of giving different people different characteristics, I would say. There's a definition, there's a separation of people into different categories, which I find interesting. But that's not the main point about the actual story. The actual story is about 2 beings which are inherently different from all the other beings. One, the protagonist, which is the heroine. 1 second. Okay, I'm going to play it very
Heroine.
Exactly this. So the main protagonist is the heroine, who is the main point of the story. And the way she is handled is that she is given the power of being able to communicate with all the types of animals, which is the crazy part about her. And that is the main part about her. Everybody is interested in her ability to be able to communicate with any animal, any type of animal. And her counterpart is an animal which can transform into any type of animal. And those 2 are basically counterparts to each other, and one is the evil part, whereas evil is hard to call it evil, but it is perceived to be the evil counterpart, while the other one is the heroine, which we are going to see everything through the lens, through the vision of the heroine. Of course, we are going to perceive her as the positive counterpart, and that makes a very interesting dynamic in the later parts of the story. I think I have to close something before we continue the story, so I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so now that I'm back, it was just 10 seconds. I just had to close one door because I was being pretty loud. Anyways, the interesting part about this story is really the world, the animals that they are depicting, the interaction with those animals, that not every animal is the same. And from my memory, it was also very interesting to how do I describe this, and what do I want to say? Both questions are quite hard for me to answer. The main part about this story that I liked was nothing. I liked everything about the story, but I can't really pinpoint a single part about it. It was just very complete. It had a high degree of completion, I would say, if that makes sense. It felt like a story that I didn't have, but I was just. It was a finished story, and it had a very finished ending, I would say. I think that's the best way of summarizing my feelings about the story. It was a very good story, which is why I'm talking about it right now, obviously. But it also, it had something special, I would say. Chance of taking, okay. Apple, heat, hiccup. Okay. Yeah, that was one story that I wanted to talk about. But again, I can't remember all the things about the story. The next story is about a very, very interesting book series that I still love to this day. I should maybe reread it, to be honest. It's such a good story. The story that I want to now mention is The Secrets of Nicholas Flamel. Nicholas Flamel was an alchemist who, does he actually exist? I have googled it and this person actually exists, which is interesting. Nicholas Flamel. Whoop. I'm going to do it like this. Okay, this works. Then I'm going to change some things. Okay, then let's increase the size. Okay, that's good enough. So, Nicolas Flamel, French, Nicolas Flamel, born in 1340 and died in 1480, 22nd of March, was a French scribe and manuscript seller. After his death, Flamel developed a reputation as an alchemist, believed to have discovered the Philosopher's Stone and to have thereby achieved immortality. These legendary accounts first appeared in the 17th century. According to texts ascribed to Flamel, almost 200 years after his death, he had learned alchemical secrets from a Jewish converso on the road to Santiago de Compostela. He has since appeared as a legendary alchemist in various fictional works. And this is the person that this story is based on. So the story that I want to talk about, I'm going to open this one. Secrets of Nicholas Flamel. I'm going to open it here. And I'm going to open Secrets of Nicholas Flamel. Okay, the alchemist, the magician, the sorceress, the necromancer, the death of Joanna of Arc, the warlock, Billy the Kid and the Vampires of Vega. That's not the one that I'm talking about. The enchantress. The Lost Stories isn't what I'm talking about either, but those things. This series of collection, it's basically 6 books, apparently. Shouldn't it be more? Definitely those 6 books. They are a series of books which deal with Nicholas Flamel, not as the main protagonist, but as a side protagonist. Nicholas Flamel is and has been depicted as an alchemist who has discovered some of the secrets of alchemy, and it is talked about the stone. It is talked about the stone, the Philosopher's Stone. You may have heard about the Philosopher's Stone. You may have heard about Nicholas Flamel in a very small amount. By talking about Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Nicholas Flamel was also mentioned in that book and movie. He was the one that has made studies about the Philosopher's Stone in that book too. And it is important to say that maybe I should talk about alchemy a little bit. The idea of alchemy is, first of all, it's a non-real. Alchemy is hard to describe for me. there are things that exist. It is the transmutation or transforming of one matter in its form or in its appearance, in its functionality, into another. And by doing so, some equivalency must be upheld. And it is quite hard for me to describe this story just from from the top of my head. But yeah, this alchemy can differ from person to person, and powers can differ from person to person. For example, there are alchemists that can deal with, or I don't know if there are alchemists, but some alchemists deal with wood. For example, growing a tree, making it, or making the wooden furniture sprout into its original shape and become a tree or something. There are ways of utilizing alchemy, and there are different ways of utilizing alchemy in this movie. In this series, and they are quite interesting, to say the very least. It's really hard to describe them when not remembering them in full. You know, right now, you know what? We are going to finish the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon right here, and I'm going to do a whole episode about the secrets of Nicolas Flamel, because I really want to talk about that book right now. So, first of all, I'm going to make a save, and beware, I hope you're waiting for the next episode, because that's going to be an episode where I'm only talking about that book, I hope. So, have a nice day and goodbye.